At Christmas dinner, my daughter-in-law gave me a name tag. It said housekeeper. Her parents snickered. My son smugly grinned and said food's for family. There wasn't a chair for me. I calmly slipped off my wedding ring, placed it on the table, and spoke 4 words. The room fell silent. You know, sometimes, one tiny moment can shatter everything you thought was true. One small, cruel gesture can make you see your entire life, your whole family, through a new, devastating lens. For me, that moment came on Christmas Day. Can you imagine dedicating 4 decades of your life to building a family, a business, a future, only to be handed a badge at Christmas dinner that screamed housekeeper? My name is Victoria Harper, and I'm 70 years old. That badge, right there, was the precise moment I realized the people I'd spent 42 years building a life for had decided I didn't deserve a seat at it anymore. I know, it sounds unbelievable, but let me tell you what happened next. I stood in that North Dallas dining room, with its vaulted ceilings and a Christmas tree that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. And I looked at that table. 10 place settings, but only 9 chairs. Crystal gleaming, linen napkins folded perfectly. The seating chart by the entryway had my name on it, all elegant calligraphy, under a section labeled support staff. My daughter-in-law, Jane, she'd clipped that badge onto my sweater herself. Right there, in front of 20 people. Her smile was so bright, her voice a little too loud, like she was making an announcement. Just so the caterers don't get confused, she chirped. We don't want anyone mixing up the family with the help. Her parents roared with laughter. Her cousins chuckled. Even some of my own grandchildren giggled, too young to understand the sting, but old enough to know when the adults thought something was funny. After raising 2 children, after building a business from nothing, after 4 decades of holding this family together, I stood there, holding a tray of wine glasses, while my daughter-in-law labeled me the help. My son, Caleb, sat near the head of the table. He glanced at the badge, then at the tray in my hands, then at the long, sparkling table. He didn't smile. He **** star. Ma, don't make that face, he said, reaching past me for the carving knife. Food's for family, you know that. Then I looked at my husband, Mark. He was sitting beside Jane's father, across the table. He adjusted his tie, looked down at his plate, said absolutely nothing. The room just kept moving around me. Conversations hummed. Wine poured. Jane's mother raised her glass, talking about their beautiful new home. A few people lifted their glasses in response. I set the tray down on the buffet. My hands were steady. 70 years of life, 40 of them spent keeping this family afloat. My hands knew how to stay calm, even when everything inside me wanted to break. I reached for my left hand and touched my wedding ring. It had been there so long, it had worn a groove into my skin. Mark bought it from a tiny shop when we were living in a rented duplex over his brother's garage. The diamond was small. The band had thinned at the bottom from decades of washing dishes, signing loan papers, building a life from nothing. I slid it off. No one noticed at first. They were too busy laughing at Jane's father's golf story. But I noticed. I noticed how light it felt in my palm. I noticed how the diamond caught the candlelight one last time. Pause, slightly more reflective tone. You know, it's Christmas Day as I'm telling you this. I wonder where you are right now. Are you at your own table, surrounded by people who truly **** you? Or are you somewhere taking a breath, because the day feels heavier than it should? Maybe you're in the kitchen, listening to this, while everyone else talks in the other room. Maybe you're in your car, or your bedroom, just needing a moment that belongs to ****. However your Christmas is going. I stepped forward, into the space where my chair should have been, right beside Caleb's seat. I placed the ring on the white linen tablecloth, directly in front of his plate. The soft ****clink* of metal on china was barely a sound, but in that moment, it cut through every conversation in the room. Forks froze midair. Glasses stopped halfway to lips. Someone's laugh died in their throat. Caleb stared down at the ring, then up at me. Mom, what are you doing? I looked at him. At the boy I'd carried on my hip while restocking shelves at our hardware store. At the teenager who used to say he'd run the family business someday. At the man who had just told me, in front of 20 people, That food was for family, and I wasn't part of it. Then I looked at Mark. His eyes were wide now, confused, like he couldn't quite process what was happening. I took a slow breath, kept my voice calm and even, and I said 4 words that would change everything. You just lost everything. The room went completely silent. Jane let out a nervous little laugh. Victoria, don't be so dramatic. It's a joke. You're part of the family, obviously. Am I? I asked quietly. No one answered. I reached up and unclipped the badge from my sweater, set it down next to the ring. Right there, on the perfect white linen, between the sterling silver and the crystal goblets. I won't be staying for dinner, I said. Merry Christmas. Then I turned and walked out, past the staircase wrapped in fresh garland, past the cousins already pulling out their phones, past the adults frozen with shock on their faces. No one tried to stop me. Not my son. Not my husband. Not one person in that room stood up and said my name. The front door was heavy, with a fancy brushed nickel handle. It clicked shut behind me with a sound that felt like the end of something. The night air hit my face, cold and sharp. All around me, the gated community glowed with Christmas lights on every roofline. Perfect houses, perfect lawns, perfect lives on display. I walked to my car, my beat-up Bic, sitting between luxury vehicles like it didn't belong. I unlocked it, slid behind the wheel, and sat there with the keys in my hand. My phone buzzed. Caleb's name lit up the screen. I watched it until it went to voicemail. Then I started the engine, backed out of the driveway, and drove away into the night. In the rearview mirror, I could see them through the big front windows. Still sitting there. Tiny shapes around that long table. Christmas dinner going on without me. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Free. The streets were empty, except for the glow of Christmas lights strung on every house I passed. I drove through the gated community slowly, carefully, like any other night. My phone kept buzzing in the passenger seat. Caleb's name flashed, then Mark's, then Caleb again. I watched the screen light up and fade, until finally I reached down and turned the phone face down. The gate opened automatically as I approached. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked questions. I drove through, and the gate closed behind me with a soft mechanical hum. Outside that neighborhood, the world looked different. Regular houses, with regular cars in the driveways. Inflatable snowmen on front lawns. Strings of colored lights that blinked instead of glowing steadily. I felt something loosen in my chest. About 20 minutes into the drive, I found myself slowing down near a neighborhood I hadn't been to in years. The streets were narrower here, the houses smaller. This was where Mark and I had started out, back when we were young and broke and full of plans. I pulled over near the corner and put the car in park. Across the street, a family was arriving home. A young couple, maybe in their 30s, getting out of a minivan with a couple of kids bouncing around them. The front door opened and an older couple stepped out onto the porch. Grandparents, I guessed. The grandmother opened her arms wide, and the children ran to her, squealing. The grandfather shook the young father's hand, then pulled him into a hug. The grandmother kissed her daughter's cheek and took one of the children by the hand, leading them all inside. The door closed. Warm lights spilled from the windows. I sat there in my car, watching that closed door for longer than I should have. Then I put the car back in drive and kept going. I didn't have a plan. Didn't know where I was going. I just drove until I saw a motel sign glowing red and white off the highway. The kind of place that charges by the night and doesn't ask questions. The parking lot was half empty. A plastic Christmas tree sat in the window of the front office, its lights blinking in a slow, tired rhythm. The woman behind the desk barely looked up when I walked in. She slid a key across the counter and told me the room number. I paid in cash. The room smelled like old carpet and cleaning solution. 2 beds with floral bedspreads that had probably been there since the 90s. A television bolted to the dresser. A bathroom with an exhaust fan that rattled when I turned on the light. I set my purse on the bed and sat down beside it. My phone buzzed again. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. 15 missed calls. 10 text messages. I opened the messages without reading them, just scanning the names. Caleb, Mark, Jane, Rebecca, my daughter, asking if I was okay, and where I was. I turned the phone off completely and set it on the nightstand. The room was quiet. Outside, I could hear cars passing on the highway. Somewhere down the hall, a television played too loud. But in here, it was just me and the sound of my own breathing. I lay back on the bed, still wearing my coat, and stared at the ceiling. The badge kept replaying in my mind. The way Jane had smiled when she clipped it on. The way her parents had laughed. The way Caleb had smirked and said those words, "Foods for family." But it wasn't just tonight. I thought about the weeks leading up to Christmas. The way Jane had handed me a list of tasks for the dinner party like I was staff she'd hired. Pick up the dry cleaning. Polish the silver. Make sure the guest bathroom has the good towels. The way Caleb had started referring to me as Mom only when he needed something. The way Mark had stopped looking at me during conversations, just nodding along to whatever Jane suggested. I thought about the day I'd overheard Jane on the phone with her mother. "It's actually convenient having her here," she'd said. "Like having live-in help, but free." I thought about the business. The store Mark and I had built from nothing. The documents I'd found in his dresser drawer last month, giving Caleb managing authority without ever asking me, without ever mentioning it. I thought about the house. The one I'd bought. The one with my name on the deed. The one where there was no chair for me at the table. How long had it been happening? How many small moments had I let slide, telling myself it was just a misunderstanding, just a bad day, just the way families talk to each other? How long had I been invisible in my own life? The clock on the nightstand glowed red. Nearly midnight. Somewhere in that big house, with the perfect tree and the expensive furniture, they were probably still sitting around that table. Maybe they'd moved on to dessert. Maybe they were laughing about something else now. The awkward moment, with the ring already fading into a story they'd tell later about how dramatic I'd been. Or maybe they were worried. Maybe they were finally realizing something had shifted. I closed my eyes. Tomorrow, I thought, I'll figure out what happens next. But one thing was already clear. Even in the quiet darkness of that motel room on Christmas night, I wasn't going back. Not to being invisible. Not to a life where my own family could hand me a badge and take away my chair and think that was acceptable. I had drawn a line tonight. And tomorrow, I would decide what came next. I woke up on that motel bed, still wearing my coat. The morning light coming through thin curtains that didn't quite meet in the middle. My neck ached. My mouth was dry. For a few seconds, I didn't remember where I was or why. Then it all came rushing back. The badge, the ring, the walkout. I sat up slowly and looked around the room. Same floral bedspread, same rattling bathroom fan, same plastic wrap cups by the sink. My phone was still off on the nightstand. I left it that way. I walked to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face, looking at myself in the mirror under the fluorescent light. 70 years old. Gray hair that needed washing. Lines around my eyes that told the story of every late night at the store. Every worry about making payroll. Every sacrifice I'd made, thinking it was building something that mattered. I thought about the woman who had walked out of that house last night. About the woman staring back at me now. And I thought about the girl I'd been before any of this started. I grew up in a town outside Waco that most people drove through without stopping. One stoplight. One diner that stayed open 24 hours because the owner lived upstairs. One grocery store. One gas station that also sold bait and lottery tickets. My mother waited tables at that diner until her knees gave out when I was 16. She'd come home after the dinner shift, smelling like coffee and grease, kick off her shoes, and soak her feet in a basin of warm water while I did my homework at the kitchen table. My father drove a delivery truck for a company that paid him by the mile, not by the hour. He was gone most weeks, home on Sundays if we were lucky. We were the kind of family that made a pound of ground beef stretch into 6 meals. We ironed aluminum foil to reuse it. We wore clothes until they couldn't be patched anymore. And even then, my mother would cut them into rags for cleaning. But we were proud. My parents worked hard. They paid their bills. They taught me that dignity wasn't about how much money you had. It was about how you carried yourself, and whether you kept your word. I met Mark Harper when I was 23, working the register at a drugstore in town. He came in to buy aspirin and ended up staying to talk for 20 minutes. He was 25, working at a hardware store 2 towns over. Full. of ideas about how things could be done better if someone just gave him a chance. We got married a year later in a little church with folding chairs and borrowed flowers. No fancy reception. No honeymoon. We moved into a duplex Mark's brother owned, living in the unit over the garage. The place was small and drafty, but it was our star. Mark kept talking about his ideas, about opening his own store someday, about being his own boss. I listened. And the more I listened, the more I believed him. We saved every penny we could. I took a second job doing bookkeeping for a tax preparer during the season. Mark worked overtime. We ate beans and rice more nights than I can count. After 2 years, we had enough for a down payment on a narrow storefront on Lancaster Avenue in Fort Worth. The building was old. The floors were uneven and creaky. The back room had a leak in the roof that dripped into a bucket when it rained. But the rent was cheap, and the location was decent. Right on a corner where people passed by on their way to work. We called it Harper's Home Supply. I painted the sign myself, standing on a stepladder in the July heat, carefully lettering each word in block print. Mark stood below, telling me when the letters were crooked. The first 10 years were the hardest. Mark worked the front, helping customers, learning what they needed, building relationships with contractors and weekend fix-it people. I kept the books in the back room, tracking every dollar that came in and went out, learning to read loan documents and negotiate with suppliers. When Rebecca was born, I was 27. I took 1 week off, then brought her back to the store with me. She slept in a bassinet behind the counter while I rang up sales and answered the phone. When she got older, I wore her in a sling on my chest, rocking her with my foot while I counted inventory. Caleb came 3 years later. By then, we'd refinanced the store twice to make it through slow winters when nobody was buying lumber or paint. We'd used my small life insurance policy as collateral once, betting everything that we'd make it through. I learned which bankers would explain things to me like I had a brain in my head, and which ones talked over me to Mark like I wasn't even in the room. But we made it. The store grew slowly, carefully. We added a small lumber section out back. Then we opened a second location in Arlington when Caleb was in elementary school. By the time he was in high school, Harper's was one of the few independent hardware stores that hadn't been bought out or crushed by the big chains. People knew us, knew our name, knew they'd get honest advice and fair prices. We built that. Mark and I together. I remember one night, Caleb was about 15. We were closing up the store, counting the register, and he was sitting on the counter, swinging his legs like he used to do when he was little. One day, "This will all be mine," he said, looking around at the aisles and the inventory and the steady hum of the place. I looked up from the cash drawer. "Ours," I said, "if you want it. But you have to want the work, not just the reward." He nodded, but I saw the look in his eyes. That distant look kids get when they're thinking about the future, but don't really understand what it costs. "Sure, Mom," he said. "I know." I should have paid more attention to that look. I should have noticed the difference between wanting something and being willing to build it. But back then, I still believed that love and sacrifice were the same thing. That if you gave enough, worked hard enough, showed up enough, the people you were building for would see your value. I believed family meant something. Sitting in that motel room on the morning after Christmas, staring at my reflection in a streaked mirror, I understood something I should have learned decades ago. It doesn't matter how much you build if the people you're building for don't respect the builder. And I was done being invisible in the house I'd built. Caleb graduated from college with a business degree and no interest in hardware. He was 22 when he told us he wanted to do something different, something bigger than the family store. Mark and I were standing in the lumber section when he said it, and I remember the way Mark's face fell, just for a second, before he covered it with a smile. "What do you want to do?" I asked. Caleb shrugged. "Consulting. Strategy. Helping businesses scale. The store is fine, but it's small, you know? I want to think bigger." I didn't argue. Rebecca had already gone her own way, into nursing, building a life in San Antonio with a man whose last name I still stumbled over. She called every week, sent pictures of her kids, visited when she could. She was happy. I wanted Caleb to be happy, too. So, we supported him. Helped him rent a desk at one of those co-working spaces in downtown Dallas, where people sat at long tables with laptops and said they were entrepreneurs. He called his business a consulting firm, though I never quite understood who he was consulting or about what. He'd show up at family dinners talking about clients and pitch decks and growth strategies, using words that sounded impressive but didn't mean much when you asked for details. Mark ate it up. He loved the idea that our son was in Dallas, in an office building with glass walls, doing business in a suit instead of work boots. He's going places, Mark would say, pride thick in his voice. I'd nod and keep quiet, even though part of me wondered what places exactly, and how he planned to get there. That's when he met Jane. She worked in the same building, something with marketing for her family's company. Her parents owned a chain of auto dealerships across North Texas, the kind of family that belonged to country clubs and talked about summering at their lake house. She wore clothes that looked expensive even when they were casual. And she had that way of speaking that made everything sound certain, like she'd never questioned a decision in her life. Caleb brought her to meet us on a Sunday afternoon at the original store. We'd just finished inventory, and the place smelled like sawdust and paint thinner. I was behind the counter in jeans and an old shirt, and Mark was helping a regular load drywall into his truck out back. Jane walked in wearing white pants and heels that clicked on the scuffed linoleum. She looked around slowly, taking in the pegboard walls, the narrow aisles, the mismatched shelving we'd added over the years as we grew. Her smile was polite, but something about it made my skin prickle. So, this is it, she said, more to Caleb than to me. The family business. This is it, I said, coming around the counter to shake her hand. We've been here almost 30 years now. It's so quaint, she said, still smiling that smile. It has character. The way she said character made it sound like a flaw. Caleb gave her a tour, pointing out sections like he'd spent years working there, instead of just a few summers in high school before he found excuses to be anywhere else. Jane nodded along, asking polite questions, but I could see her checking her phone when she thought we weren't looking. When they left, Mark came back. Inside, wiping his hands on a rag. She seems nice, he said. She does, I agreed. There's something about the visit sat wrong with me. Within 6 months, they were engaged. The wedding was the following spring at a country club I'd only ever seen from the highway. Tall columns out front, a lawn that looked like a golf course, waiters in bow ties carrying champagne on silver trays. Jane's parents paid for most of it, but we contributed, quietly. Mark wrote checks without telling me the amounts, but I saw the statements later. We paid for the flowers, the photographer, the rehearsal dinner that cost more than our mortgage payment. At the wedding, Jane's family took up most of the guest list, her father's business associates, her mother's book club friends, cousins from Houston, aunts from New Mexico. Our side of the church was smaller, the people from the store, Mark's brother and his family, a handful of old friends. During the reception, I overheard Jane talking to one of her cousins near the dessert table. Caleb's family is sweet, she was saying, her voice light and airy. Very hardworking, very grounded. His mom still works the counter at their little store. Can you imagine? I keep telling Caleb he needs to get them to retire, but I think they like the routine. She laughed, and the cousin laughed with her, and I stood there holding a plate of cake I no longer wanted. That night, I mentioned it to Mark while we were getting ready for bed in our hotel room. Jane said something that bothered me. I started. She's young, Mark said, not looking up from untying his shoes. She doesn't mean anything by it. She called the store little, I said, like it was something small to be embarrassed about. It is small, Mark said, compared to what her family has. That's not a bad thing. Victoria. Different worlds, that's all. But over the next year, I noticed Mark measuring our success by Jane's family standards instead of our own. He started talking about expanding, about franchise opportunities, about selling to a bigger chain and cashing out while we could. Jane's father says independent stores won't last another decade, he'd say over dinner. He says we should think about our exit strategy. We're not exiting, I'd remind him. This is our life's work. It's a business, he'd say. Businesses change. Jane started reshaping the family story, too. At gatherings with her friends, I'd hear her talk about how Caleb was taking over the family business soon, making it sound like he was already running things, when he barely showed up except to walk through and wave at the staff. She'd talk about our plans to expand, to modernize, to partner with bigger suppliers, things we'd never actually discussed. And Caleb would stand there nodding, not correcting her, letting her spin a version of reality that had nothing to do with the truth. Mark never corrected her either. He was too dazzled by the connections, by the invitations to golf tournaments and charity dinners, by the idea that marrying into Jane's family meant we'd moved up somehow. I watched the shift happen, slowly. The way Mark started dressing differently. The way he talked about the store like it was something to move past, instead of something to be proud of. The way he stopped asking my opinion and started making decisions based on what Jane's father would think. And I stayed quiet, because I'd been raised to believe that keeping the peace mattered more than speaking up. I should have seen it then, the pattern forming, the respect slipping away one small moment at a time. But I told myself it was temporary, that once Caleb and Jane settled down, once they had kids, things would balance out. I was wrong. The phone call came on a Tuesday evening, about a year after the wedding. I was at the store doing end-of-day paperwork when my cell rang. Caleb's name flashed on the screen. "Mom, can you and Dad come over for dinner this weekend?" he asked. "Jane and I want to talk to you about something." "About what?" I asked, already sensing the careful tone in his voice, the one he used when he was about to ask for something. "It's good news," he said. "We'll explain when you get here." That Saturday, Mark and I drove to the apartment Caleb and Jane were renting in a complex near downtown Dallas. It was nice enough. 2 bedrooms, a balcony overlooking a pool. But Jane had made it clear, more than once, that it wasn't where she planned to stay. "We're outgrowing this place," she'd say whenever we visited. "We need something with room to grow." They were expecting their first child. Jane was 4 months along, just starting to show. Dinner was takeout from an expensive Italian place, the kind where the portions are small and the prices are large. We sat at their dining table, the same one Mark and I had bought them as a wedding gift, and made small talk while we ate. Finally, Caleb pushed his plate aside and glanced at Jane. She nodded. "So," he began, folding his hands on the table, "we've been looking at houses." "That's exciting," Mark said. "Found anything you like?" "We did," Jane said, pulling out her phone and showing us photos. "It's in a gated community north of Dallas. Great schools, beautiful neighborhood, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths. The master suite alone is bigger than this entire apartment." I looked at the photos. The house was enormous, modern, all clean lines and big windows and professionally landscaped yards. "It's lovely," I said, "but that's got to be expensive." "It is," Caleb admitted. "That's what we wanted to talk to you about." He laid it out like a business proposal. They'd found the perfect house, but couldn't qualify for the full mortgage on their own. Not yet. Caleb's consulting business was still building. Jane worked part-time for her father's company, but was planning to stay home once the baby came. "What we're thinking," Caleb said, "is a partnership. You buy the house as an investment property. We pay you rent until we can take over the mortgage ourselves. Win for everyone." I sat back in my chair and looked at Mark. He was nodding slowly, like he'd already decided this was a good idea. "It's basically real estate investment," Jane added. "You'd own an asset that appreciates. We'd have the space we need for the baby, and eventually we buy you out. Everybody benefits." "How much are we talking about?" I asked. Caleb slid a piece of paper across the table. I looked at the number and felt my stomach tighten. The house was 3 times what Mark and I had paid for our current home. The down payment alone would take a significant chunk of our savings. "Can we think about it?" I asked. "Of course," Jane said quickly. "But the market's moving fast. The seller wants an answer by next week." On the drive home, Mark was quiet for a long time. "What do you think?" I finally asked. "I think it's a good opportunity," he said. "Real estate's solid, and it's for our grandchild. For Caleb's family. It's a lot of money, Mark." "We have it," he said. "What else are we saving it for? We're not getting any younger. Might as well help our kids while we can." I ran the numbers that night at the kitchen table. Spreadsheets and calculator, and bank statements spread out in front of me. We had the money, barely, but it would leave us with almost no cushion. If something went wrong at the store, if one of us got sick, if anything unexpected happened, we'd be in trouble. But Caleb was our son, and Jane was carrying our first grandchild. I called Caleb the next morning. "We'll do it," I said. "But the deed stays in my name until the mortgage is paid off. Once you're ready to buy us out, we can transfer it. Until then, it's our property, legally." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Is that really necessary?" Caleb asked. "We're family." "It's necessary," I said firmly. "This is a business arrangement. Like you said, we need to protect ourselves." Another pause. "Okay," he said finally, "if that's what it takes." We closed on the house 6 weeks later. I signed more papers than I could count, my hand cramping from writing my name over and over. Caleb and Jane were there, excited, making plans about furniture and paint colors. Mark squeezed my shoulder as we left the title company. "You did a good thing," he said. I wanted to believe him. 3 months later, after the baby was born, things shifted again. Mark and I were still living in our old house, the one we'd raised the kids in. It was small, but paid off. Comfortable. Then Caleb called. "Mom, Jane's overwhelmed with the baby," he said. "And the house is so big. We've got that whole guest suite on the first floor that's just sitting empty. What if you and Dad moved in, just temporarily? You could help with the baby, and we could all be together. It would be like those multi-generational households everyone's talking about now." I should have said no, but I heard the exhaustion in his voice, and I thought about my grandchild, tiny and new, needing all the help he could get. "Let me talk to your father," I said. Mark loved the idea, loved the thought of being close to the baby, loved the modern house with its smart appliances and surround sound. He was ready to sell our old place and move in that same week. So, we did. We sold the house where we'd raised our children, where I painted the walls and planted the garden and fixed the leaky faucet a dozen times. We packed up 30 years of memories into boxes and moved into the guest suite of the house I'd bought for my son. The suite was nice. Bedroom, bathroom, small sitting area, separate entrance. Jane kept calling it your own space, making it sound like we were getting something special instead of being tucked away in a corner of a house that was supposed to be theirs but was legally mine. At first, it was fine. Good, even. I'd hold my grandson, this tiny, perfect person with Caleb's eyes and Jane's nose, and feel like maybe this had been the right choice. I'd help with feedings and diaper changes. I'd cook meals while Jane recovered. Mark would sit in the nursery with the baby sleeping on his chest, looking happier than I'd seen him in years. But slowly, things changed. Jane started asking me to do more. Small things at first. Could I pick up groceries while I was out? Could I start a load of laundry? The baby was fussy and she was so tired. Could I watch him while she took a nap? I said yes. Every time, I said yes. Because that's what grandmothers do. That's what family does. But then the requests got bigger. Jane needed me to clean the upstairs bathrooms because the cleaning service was too expensive now with the baby. Could I organize the playroom? Could I meal prep for the week? Could I be home by 3 to watch the baby because Jane had a hair appointment? I was doing more housework than I'd done in my own home. More cooking, more cleaning, more childcare. And somewhere along the way, without anyone saying it out loud, I stopped being the grandmother who lived in the guest suite. I became the help. It's funny how you can lose yourself one small request at a time. The first few months in that house, I told myself I was helping, being useful, doing what grandmothers are supposed to do when their children have babies and busy lives. But there's a difference between helping and being help star. I learned that difference in the space between one season and the next. It started with Jane asking if I could grab her a glass of water while I was up. Reasonable enough. Then it became asking me to bring her phone from the other room. Then her laptop. Then a snack. Then another snack, because she didn't like the first one. One afternoon, Jane had 3 of her friends over for lunch on the back patio. I was in the kitchen, putting away groceries I'd picked up that morning, things Jane had texted me to get because she was too busy to go herself. I heard her laugh, that bright, practiced laugh she used with her friends. And then I heard the snap of fingers. "Victoria, can you bring out the pitcher of iced tea? And maybe some of those little cookies." I brought the tea. I brought the cookies. I refilled glasses when they got low. One of her friends thanked me. The others barely looked up. As I walked back into the house, I heard Jane's voice drift through the open door. It's so convenient. Honestly, having her here is like having staff, but family. She loves to help. Her friends murmured agreement. Someone said something about wishing her own mother lived closer. I stood in the kitchen, my hands braced against the counter, staring at nothing. Another day, Caleb caught me on my way to the store. "Hey, Mom, can you do me a favor?" he asked, barely looking up from his phone. "I need to pick up my dry cleaning, but I've got calls all afternoon." "I'm going to the hardware store," I said. "That's the opposite direction." "Oh." He finally looked at me. "Could you maybe go after? It closes at 6, and I really need that suit for tomorrow." I went. Of course, I went. And the next time, he didn't even ask. Just texted me the address of the dry cleaner and said, "Thanks. You're the best." At the store, things were changing, too. Caleb had started showing up once a week, sometimes twice. Not to work, not to help, just to walk through like he owned the place, shaking hands with customers, chatting with the staff, taking photos for his social media, building the family brand, he called it. I watched him one Tuesday afternoon, standing near the paint section, talking to Louis, one of our longest employees. Louis was explaining a problem we were having with a supplier, laying out the details, asking what Caleb thought we should do. Caleb nodded, said something vague about looking into it, clapped Louis on the shoulder, and walked away without writing anything down or following up. Louis came to me an hour later. "Did Caleb say anything to you about the supplier issue?" he asked. "No," I said. "What do you need?" We solved it the way we always did. I called the supplier, negotiated a better rate, arranged the new delivery schedule. Louis thanked me and went back to work. When I mentioned it to Mark that evening, he shrugged. "Caleb's busy with his own clients," he said. "He can't be expected to handle every little detail." "Those little details keep the store running," I said. "He'll learn," Mark said. "Give him time. It's good. That is showing his face there. Customers like seeing the family involved." But Caleb wasn't involved. He was performing involvement. And somehow, that was enough for Mark. I stayed quiet about most of it. Told myself it was temporary. That once the baby got older, once Jane felt more settled, things would balance out. That Caleb would eventually realize the difference between appearing to run a business and actually running one. I kept my head down and did what needed doing. Until I found the envelope. It was a Saturday morning. Mark had gone to play golf with Jane's father, something he'd started doing regularly. I was putting away laundry in our room when I noticed his dresser drawer wasn't quite closed. I pushed it shut, but it caught on something. I opened it to fix whatever was jamming it and saw a manila envelope, folded in half, stuffed in the back corner under his socks. I almost left it. Almost closed the drawer and walked away. But something about the way it was hidden made me pause. I pulled it out and opened it. Legal documents. Forms I recognized, because I'd been signing them for 30 years. Partnership agreements. Transfer of authority. Management restructuring. My hands started shaking as I read through the pages. Caleb was being given managing authority over Harper's Home Supply. Decision-making power. Access to accounts. Control over operations and staffing. Mark had signed it 2 weeks ago. My name wasn't on it. I hadn't been consulted. Hadn't been told. I sat on the edge of the bed with those papers in my lap and felt something crack open inside my chest. The store Mark and I built together. That I had poured decades of my life into. That I had learned to run when nobody thought a woman could. That I had saved more than once with my own money and my own credit when banks wouldn't give us loans. And Mark had just handed it to Caleb without saying a word to me. I was still sitting there when Mark came home 3 hours later, whistling as he walked through the door. He stopped when he saw me in the bedroom doorway, the envelope in my hand. "What's that?" he asked, though his face told me he already knew. "You tell me," I said, holding it out. He took it, glanced at the papers, and set it on the dresser. "It's just paperwork, Victoria. Making things official." "Official?" I repeated. "You gave Caleb managing authority over our business without telling me." "I meant to tell you," he said. I just hadn't found the right time. The right time? I said slowly. When would that have been, Mark? After he'd already made decisions I didn't agree with? After he'd changed things I'd built? Or were you just never going to tell me at all? Don't be dramatic, he said, loosening his tie. It's time for Caleb to step up, to take charge. We're not getting any younger, and he needs to learn how to run things. He doesn't know how to run things, I said. He shows up twice a week for photo opportunities while the actual staff does the work. He'll learn by doing, Mark said. That's how we learned. We learned by waking, I said. By being there every single day. By making sacrifices and hard decisions. Caleb's not doing any of that. Mark sighed, like I was being difficult. Like I was the problem. You've always been too hard on him, he said. He's doing his best. And frankly, the store needs fresh energy, new ideas. Caleb can bring that. What about my ideas? I asked. What about my energy? I'm still here, Mark. I still work there every day. I still handle the accounts and the suppliers and all the things that actually matter. But suddenly, I don't get a say in who runs the place. You're making this about you when it's about him, Mark said. It's about giving our son an opportunity. It's about you erasing me, I said. He looked genuinely confused. Nobody's erasing you, Victoria. You're still part of the business. You'll always be part of it. But not equal, I said. Not respected. Not consulted. Just there. Just useful. He didn't answer that. Didn't seem to understand why I was upset. And in that moment, standing in the bedroom of a house I'd bought for my son, while my husband defended giving away the business I'd helped build, I understood something terrible. Mark didn't see me as a partner anymore. He saw me as a supporting character in someone else's story. And I had let it happen. One yes at a time. One favor. One compromise. One moment of staying quiet when I should have spoken up. I walked out of the room and closed the door behind me. Mark didn't follow. After the confrontation about the business documents, things in the house became quieter, more careful. Mark and I moved around each other like strangers sharing a waiting room. He went to work. I went to work. We came home to that big house where we lived in a guest suite and pretended everything was fine. Caleb barely noticed the tension. Or if he did, he ignored it. Jane noticed. I could see it in the way she watched me during dinner. Her eyes calculating, measuring. She was smart enough to know something had shifted, but not quite sure what. 3 weeks after I found those papers, I was in the upstairs hallway folding sheets from the dryer. The laundry room was tucked at the end of the hall near the master bedroom. I'd learned to do laundry during the day when the house was quiet, when I could get things done without being asked to do 17 other tasks at the same time. I was standing at the folding table, matching corners on a fitted sheet, when I heard Jane's voice coming from the bedroom. The door was open just enough that sound carried. She was on the phone. I wasn't trying to listen, but her voice had that edge to it, the one she used when she was being honest instead of polite. No, I know, she was saying. But it's getting awkward. She's here all the time. When people come over, they don't know if she's family or staff. It's confusing. I stopped folding. I mean, she's useful, Jane continued. Don't get me wrong. The free childcare is amazing, and she does all the housework without being asked. But useful isn't the same as, lovable star. Useful, not lovable. The words hit like a slap. We've been looking at those luxury retirement communities, Jane said. The nice ones, with the activities and the meal plans. We'll sell it as a gift. Like, you've worked so hard, you deserve to relax. All of that. She'll feel guilty saying no. There was a pause while whoever was on the other end responded. Well, that's the thing, Jane said, her voice dropping lower. Once she's settled there, we can simplify everything. The business structure is a mess. Mark said Caleb technically doesn't have full control because Victoria's name is still on half the paperwork. And this house, legally, it's still in her name. Can you believe that? She's living in our house, but we don't even own it. Another pause. Right. So, we get her to sign some documents, present it as estate planning or whatever. Simplifying things for tax purposes. She doesn't need to understand all the details. Mark can handle her. And then we're clear. House is ours. Business is ours. She's taken care of in a nice place. We're not the bad guys. And everyone's happy. I stood frozen in that hallway, with a half-folded sheet in my hands. Caleb's nervous about it, Jane admitted. He thinks she won't go for it. But honestly, what choice does she have? It's not like she can afford to move out on her own. Not with what retirement costs these days. This way, she gets a nice place, and we get our house back. Win for everyone. The person on the other end must have asked about me staying in the guest suite, because Jane laughed. God, no. I need that space for when my parents visit. And frankly, the optics are terrible. People think we can't afford our own place, or that we need a live-in nanny. It makes us look, I don't know, less than star. Less than. I carefully, silently, set the sheet down on the folding table. Look, I'm not heartless, Jane said. She's been helpful, but there's a difference between helping when you visit and just being hey all the time star. It's our house, our life, our family. She had her turn. There was more conversation, something about timing and paperwork and making sure Mark was on board, but I stopped listening. I walked back down the hallway, on legs that felt numb, into the guest suite. Closed the door. Sat on the edge of the bed. They were going to take it all. The house I'd bought. The business I'd built. My autonomy. My choice. My place in my own family. They were going to wrap it up like a gift, call it generosity, and make me sign away everything I'd worked for. And then they'd put me somewhere out of sight, where I wouldn't be confusing to their guests or inconvenient to their image. I thought about the women I'd known over the years who'd ended up in those places. Nice places, sure. Clean rooms and organized activities and meals on a schedule. But still, places where you went when your family decided they were done making room for you in their actual lives. My mother had died at 68, still living in her own home, still making her own choices until the very end. She'd have burned the house down before she let someone shuffle her off to a facility because she was inconvenient. I stood up and opened the closet. On the top shelf, pushed to the back behind the winter coats, was an old accordion file. Brown with age, a rubber band around it that had lost its stretch years ago. I pulled it down and set it on the bed. Inside were decades of documents. Original partnership agreements for the store. Loan papers. Property deeds. Insurance policies. Every important piece of paper that marked the building of our life. I spread them out on the bedspread. The deed to the house, my name, my signature, my property. The business registration for Harper's Home Supply, both our names, but mine first, because I'd filed the paperwork. The mortgage documents, my credit score that had gotten us approved when Mark's alone wouldn't have been enough. Retirement accounts. Investment statements. The paper trail of everything we'd saved and built and earned. I read through each document slowly, carefully, seeing them with new eyes. What could they take? Only what I let them take. What could I take back? Everything that was already mine. I thought about Jane's voice on that phone call. About the way she'd said useful but not lovable. Like those were the only two options. Like being useful meant you'd forfeited the right to be valued as a person. I thought about Caleb, being nervous but going along with it anyway. Too weak to stop his wife from plotting to exile his own mother. Too comfortable with the ease of it to do the right thing. I thought about Mark, who apparently could handle me, who would help them convince me to sign away my own life because it was easier than standing up for his wife of 4 decades. I pulled out my phone and took photos of every document, every deed, every account statement, every piece of proof that showed exactly what I owned and what I'd built. Then I put the documents back in the accordion file, put the file back in the closet, and sat down at the small desk in the corner of the suite. I opened my laptop and searched for lawyers who specialized in property law and family businesses. I wasn't angry. Not in the loud, explosive way. Not in the way that makes you scream or throw things or make dramatic declarations. I was something colder than anger. Something more dangerous. I was clear. They thought they could frame my loss as a gift. They'd forgotten who taught them what they knew about business, about negotiation, about reading the fine print and understanding leverage. They'd forgotten who actually built the foundation they were standing on. But I hadn't forgotten. And I wasn't going anywhere except exactly where I chose to go, on my own terms, with everything that was mine. The next morning, I waited until Caleb and Jane had left for a holiday event at her parents' place. Mark had already left for the store, same as every weekday morning, like nothing had changed between us. I stood at the window and watched their car dissipate down the street. Then I grabbed my purse and keys and drove to the law office on the other side of Fort Worth. Robert Mitchell had been our business attorney for 20 years. He'd handled the paperwork when we opened the Arlington location, helped us through 2 refinancings, and drew up our wills when the kids were small. He was in his 60s now, gray hair and reading glasses. The kind of lawyer who actually listened instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. I'd called him the day before, told him I needed to review some documents. He didn't ask questions, just told me to come by whenever I was ready. His office smelled like old books and coffee. He met me at the door with a handshake and led me to a small conference room with a table covered in files. "Victoria," he said as we sat down. "What's going on?" I told him everything. The house, the business documents Mark had signed without telling me, the conversation I'd overheard, the plan to move me into a retirement community and take control of everything I'd built. Robert listened without interrupting, making notes on a legal pad, his expression getting more serious with every sentence. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and looked at me for a long moment. "Do you want my legal opinion or my personal one?" he asked. "Both," I said. "Personally," he began, "I think your family's treating you terribly, and you'd be justified in whatever you decide to do." He leaned forward. "Legally, you have more power than they realize. A lot more." He pulled out a folder and started going through documents. "The store," he said, spreading out the partnership agreement. "You and Mark are equal partners on paper, but you're the one who filed the original business registration. You're the one whose credit got you through the rough years. You've been signing the checks and managing the accounts for 3 decades. If it came to a legal battle, a judge would see that you've been the primary operator." He pulled out another document. "The house, that one simple. Your name is on the deed alone. Caleb and Jane have no legal claim to it whatsoever. They're essentially tenants, whether they realize it or not." "Mark helped pay for it," I said, "from a joint account." "Sure, but the title is an asterisk your asterisk name. That's what matters legally. You could sell that house tomorrow and they couldn't stop you." He opened another file. "Retirement accounts. Most of these are joint, which means both of you have access, but there are beneficiary designations and survivorship clauses. Given that Mark's health hasn't been great lately, the blood pressure issues and the medications, you need to make sure everything's structured the way you want it." I thought about Mark's doctor appointments over the past year, the prescriptions that kept multiplying, the way he got winded walking upstairs. "What can I do?" I asked. Robert picked up his pen. "Lots of things. Question is, what do you want to do?" I took a breath. "I want control of what's mine," I said. "I want the house and the business protected so they can't be taken from me or signed away while I'm pressured or manipulated. I want to make my own decisions about where I live and what happens to everything I've built." "Okay," Robert said. "Let's do this right." We spent the next 3 hours going through everything. He drafted a trust in my name, with me as the sole trustee. The house would go into the trust. My share of the business would go into the trust. My individual accounts would be transferred to the trust. Everything protected. Everything under my control alone. "Nobody can force you to sign anything," Robert explained. "Nobody can make decisions about your assets without your explicit approval. If Mark tries to give Caleb more authority, you can block it. If they try to sell something, you can block it. You're in the driver's seat." "What about the store?" I asked. "I don't want Caleb to have it. He hasn't earned it." Robert nodded. "Have you thought about selling to your employees? Louis and Tina, the people who've actually been running it with you?" I had thought about it. I had thought about it more over the past few weeks than I wanted to admit. "They couldn't afford market value," I said. "You could structure it as an owner-financed sale," he suggested. "They pay you over time, below market rate. You'd still get income from it. They get a business they've helped build, and Caleb gets nothing. Something in my chest loosened at that idea. I like that, I said. We drafted intent to sell documents, papers that outlined the offer to Louis, Tina, and 2 other longtime employees. Fair terms, reasonable payments. A business that would stay in the hands of people who actually cared about it. The house, Robert said. What do you want to do there? Sell it, I said without hesitation. List it right after New Year's. I'll find somewhere smaller, somewhere that's actually mine. They're going to fight you on this, Robert warned. Let them, I said. It's my house. We drew up listing paperwork, contacted a realtor Robert knew, set a timeline for getting it on the market by the 2nd week of January. Bank accounts, Robert said. I'd recommend transferring your personal funds to a different bank, somewhere Mark doesn't have automatic access, just in case. I nodded. Can we do that today? We can start the process. By the time I left Robert's office, the sun was starting to set. The sky was orange and pink, the kind of winter sunset that looks like it's apologizing for the cold. My phone had been buzzing in my purse all afternoon. I pulled it out and saw text messages from Jane. Can you pick up the silver polish on your way home? Need the good stuff, not the cheap kind. Also, grab more coffee. We're almost out. What time will you be back? Need help getting dinner started? I stared at those messages, at the casual assumption that I had nothing better to do than run her errands and cook her meals. A week ago, I would have stopped at the store, would have rushed home to make sure dinner was ready on time. Now, I almost laughed. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. The big dinner was the day after. Jane had been planning it for weeks, sending me lists and instructions, treating me like catering staff. She had no idea that the woman she'd been ordering around had just spent the afternoon taking back every bit of power they'd thought they could strip away. I put my phone back in my purse without responding. Then I drove to a diner near the highway and ordered myself a meal. Sat at a booth by the window and ate slowly, watching the traffic pass by, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The revenge was in motion. And they had no idea it was coming. Christmas Day arrived, cold and bright. I woke up in that guest suite in the house I legally owned and got dressed with a kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly what you're going to do. The paperwork was signed. The trust was established. The house would be listed in 2 weeks. The store would be sold to people who deserved it. My accounts were being transferred to a bank where Mark's name appeared nowhere. All of it done quietly. Legally. Irreversibly. Today was just theater. One last performance before the curtain came down. I could hear Jane upstairs, her voice sharp as she directed the caterers through the final setup. Mark had left early to pick up her parents from their hotel. Caleb was somewhere dealing with last-minute details, playing the role of host in a house he thought would someday be his. I walked upstairs and looked around the main floor. The house was staged like a magazine spread. Every surface polished, every decoration placed with precision. White and gold everywhere. The colors Jane had chosen because they photographed well. The tree in the living room was 7 feet tall, covered in matching ornaments that had been purchased as a set. Nothing handmade or sentimental. Nothing with history. I looked for anything of mine in that space. Any evidence that I'd lived there for 3 years. Any photo. Any object. Any small marker of my existence. There was nothing. The pictures on the walls were of Caleb and Jane's wedding, of Jane's family vacations, of professional portraits taken at the country club. The books on the shelves were decorative spines that matched the color scheme. The furniture was all new, expensive, chosen by Jane. I had been erased from this house long before I'd planned to leave it. Guests started arriving around noon. Jane's parents first, loud and cheerful, commenting on every detail of the decorations. Then her siblings, her cousins, friends from the country club, Mark's brother and his wife. Jane moved through the rooms like a conductor, positioning people for photos, adjusting decorations, making sure everything looked perfect. "Victoria," she called out as I came down the hallway. "Can you stay in the kitchen for now? I want to get some family photos before we eat, and it'll be easier with less people in the frame." Less people. Not *family people. I nodded and went to the kitchen, watching from the doorway as Jane arranged everyone in front of the tree. Mark stood beside Caleb, looking proud. The baby sat on Jane's hip. Her parents flanked them on either side. They took a dozen photos, different poses, different groupings. Not once did anyone suggest including me. I wasn't hurt. Not anymore. I was taking notes, watching who participated in my erasure and how easily they did it. The dining room table was set for 20. Crystal glasses at every place. China plates with gold trim. Cloth napkins folded into shapes I didn't recognize. And those place cards. I watched Jane set them out, reading each one. Granddad, Nana, Uncle Tim, Cousin Ashley, each one in that gold script, elegant and expensive. Then I saw her pull out one more card from the stack. Not a place card. A badge on a lanyard. She smiled as she set it aside on the buffet. People gathered around the table. Conversations hummed. Someone opened wine. Jane's mother made a toast about family and blessings and being together in this beautiful home. That's when Jane walked over to me, that bright smile on her face, holding the badge. Just so the caterers don't get confused, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. We don't want anyone mixing up the family with the help. She clipped it onto my sweater. Housekeeper. Her parents laughed. The cousins laughed. A few of the grandchildren giggled. I stood very still, looking around the room, watching faces. Jane's parents thought it was hilarious, absolutely delighted by their daughter's wit. Her siblings looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Mark's brother glanced away. Mark himself sat at the table, adjusting his tie, looking at his plate like it was the most interesting thing in the room. Caleb caught my eye for just a second, and I saw something flicker there. Guilt, maybe, or fear, but not enough of either to make him speak up. I accepted the badge. Didn't argue. Didn't protest. I just watched. Evaluated. Catalogued exactly who found it funny, and who stayed silent, and who looked away. Then I looked at the table. 10 place settings. 9 chairs. The seating chart by the entryway had my name under support staff. I picked up the tray of wine glasses Jane had set out for me to distribute, held it carefully, walked to the buffet, and set it down. Caleb was reaching for the carving knife, ready to play the role of man of the house. Ma, don't make that face, he said, not quite looking at me. Food's for family, you know that. Break to the audience. Everyone's waiting on you now, aren't they? Wondering what you're thinking about this story, what your own Christmas looks like, whether you've ever felt like the person standing while everyone else sits. Drop a comment and tell me, where are you right now? What's your Christmas been like? Are you the one holding everything together while everyone else enjoys the celebration? Return to story. I reached for my left hand. The wedding ring slid off easily. I'd already loosened it that morning, knowing this moment was coming. I held it for just a second, feeling its weight, remembering the day Mark put it on my finger in a tiny church with folding chairs. Then I stepped forward, into the gap where my chair should have been. I placed the ring on the white linen, directly in front of Caleb's plate. The soft sound of metal on china cut through every conversation. Folks stopped. Glasses paused halfway to lips. Someone's laugh died. Caleb stayed at the ring, then at me. Mom, what are you doing? I looked at him. At my son who'd let his wife treat me like staff. At the man who'd accepted authority over my business without earning it. At the person who'd stayed silent while I was erased from my own life. I looked at Mark, who finally raised his eyes to meet mine. Confusion and something like fear crossing his face. I looked at Jane, whose smile had frozen into something brittle. I took a breath, and I said it. Full words, calm and clear. You just lost everything. The room went silent. Jane recovered first. That nervous laugh. Victoria, don't be so dramatic. It's a joke. You're part of the family, obviously. Am I? I asked quietly. Nobody answered. I reached up and unclipped the badge. Set it beside the ring. I won't be staying for dinner, I said. Merry Christmas. I walked out, past the tree with its perfect ornaments, past the family photos that didn't include me, past 24 people who'd watched me be labeled as help and said nothing. Not one person stood up. Not one person called my name. The front door closed behind me with a solid click. I walked to my car, got in, started the engine. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. In the rearview mirror, I saw them through the windows. Still there. Still sitting. still having no idea what those 4 words actually meant. They thought I was hurt, embarrassed, making a scene. They didn't know about the trust, the sale, the transfer of accounts, the lawyer, the plan. They didn't know I just walked away from people who'd already lost everything that mattered. And they wouldn't know until it was far too late to stop it. The morning after Christmas, I drove straight to the original Harper's Home Supply on Lancaster Avenue. Not the newer Arlington location. The first one. The store Mark and I had opened 40 years ago with a dream and a loan we could barely afford. The building looked the same as it always had. Narrow storefront, faded sign, squeaky floors that announced every customer who walked through the door. The back room still had that leak in the corner we'd patched so many times it had become a joke among the staff. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Sawdust, paint, motor oil, that particular combination of scents that meant work and purpose, and something built with actual hands. I walked down the aisle slowly, running my fingers along the metal shelving, the pegboard displays, the bins of screws and nails, organized by size. Every inch of this place had a memory attached. Every improvement had been fought for and earned. I heard the bell over the door jingle and turned to see Louis walking in, early as always, coffee in hand. He stopped when he saw me. "Victoria," he said, surprise and concern mixing in his voice. "Didn't expect to see you today. Thought you'd be with family." "Plans changed," I said. He nodded slowly, reading something in my face. Louis had worked for us for 18 years. He knew when not to ask questions. "Need help with anything?" he asked. "Not right now," I said. "But soon. I'll need to talk to you and Tina. Something important." "Whenever you're ready," he said, and headed toward the back to start his morning routine. I made coffee in the small break room, using the ancient machine that sputtered and hissed but still worked. Sat at the desk in the corner office where I'd done bookkeeping for decades. The morning sun came through the window at an angle, lighting up dust particles in the air. This was real. This mattered. Not the staged house with its perfect decorations. Not the family photos that didn't include me. Not the dining room table with no chair for the person who'd bought the furniture. This. I was still sitting there when I heard the bell jingle again an hour later. Heavy footsteps. The pace of someone angry. Mark appeared in the doorway of the office. His face flushed. Still wearing his dress shirt from yesterday's dinner. Wrinkled now. "What the hell were you thinking?" he demanded. "Walking out like that. Embarrassing us in front of everyone." I looked at him calmly. "Good morning, Mark." "Don't good morning me," he said. "Jane called me 15 times last night. Her parents think you've lost your mind. Caleb doesn't know what to say to people. You made us look like fools." "I made you look like fools," I repeated slowly. "That's what you're upset about." "You walked out of Christmas dinner because of a joke," he said. "A stupid badge. Jane meant it as a light thing. You completely overreacted." I opened the folder on the desk in front of me, the one I prepared yesterday with Robert's help. "Come sit down, Mark," I said. "I don't want to sit down. I want you to come home and apologize so we can fix this." "Sit down," I said again. And something in my voice made him stop. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat, still radiating anger, but starting to look uncertain. I slid the first document across the desk. "That's the trust paperwork," I said. "As of 2 days ago, the house is in my name alone, protected by a trust that only I control. You can't sign it away. You can't give Caleb authority over it. It's mine." Mark picked up the paper, his eyes scanning it, confusion replacing some of the anger. "What asterisk is asterisk this?" I slid him the next document. "Intent to sell Harper's Home Supply. To Louis, Tina, and the co-staff who've actually been running it. Owner financed. Fair terms. They'll take over officially by March. You're selling the store." His voice went up. "Without asking asterisk me asterisk." "I'm selling asterisk my asterisk half of the store," I said. "You can do what you want with yours. Give it to Caleb if you think he deserves it. But my share goes to people who've earned it." I slid him the third set of papers, listing agreement for the house. "It goes on the market January 10th. We'll split the profit after the mortgage is paid." Mark stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "You can't do this," he said. "I already did." Victoria, this is insane. You're throwing away everything we built because Jane made a stupid joke. It's not about the badge, I said quietly. It's about the year before the badge. The year before that. It's about you giving Caleb managing authority over this business without telling me. It's about letting Jane treat me like staff for 3 years while you played golf with her father. It's about you choosing their comfort over my dignity every single time it mattered. His face was red now. I was trying to keep the family together. By erasing me from it, I finished. He opened his mouth. Closed it. We can fix this, he said finally. But his voice was weak. We can talk to them. Set boundaries. Make it better. I'm done trying to fix what shouldn't have been broken in the first place, I said. I pulled out one more paper, the rental listing for a small house on the coast near Corpus Christi. 2 bedrooms. Walking distance to the water. Plain and simple. And nobody else's. I'm moving here, I said. End of January. You can come with me if you want. We can start over. Simple life. No Caleb calling you for favors. No Jane asking me to polish silver. Just us. Like it used to be. Before we forgot who we were. Mark looked at the listing, then at me. You're serious, he said. Completely. But Caleb. He started. The baby. Jane's expecting us to help. Caleb is a grown man, I said. Jane has parents with money and connections. They'll be fine. They need us. Mark said. They need free labor and money they didn't earn, I said. That's not the same thing. He sat there, holding all those papers, his hands shaking slightly. I won't live where I'm treated as staff, I said. I won't stay in a house where there's no chair for me. I won't keep building things for people who don't value the builder. You're free to choose them or me, but I'm done choosing people who won't choose me back. Mark's face crumpled, not with anger anymore, with something closer to panic. I never meant for it to get like this, he said. I thought I was doing the right thing, supporting our son, being a good father. You didn't realize how bad it had gotten, I said. You didn't realize because you weren't paying attention. You were too busy impressing Jane's father and defending Caleb to notice your wife becoming invisible. He put his head in his hands. What do you want me to do? He asked. I want you to think, I said. Really think about what kind of life you want and who you want to be in it. Then make your choice. I stood up, gathered my things. I'm not going back to that house. I'm staying at a motel until the rental is ready. If you want to talk, you know where to find me, but I'm not waiting around while you decide if I'm worth standing up for. I left him there, sitting at that desk with papers spread in front of him that proved the life he'd assumed would never change was already over. The paperwork for the store sale took 2 weeks to finalize. Robert handled most of it, drawing up contracts that protected everyone involved. Louis and Tina would take over ownership with 3 other longtime employees. They'd pay me in monthly installments over 10 years at a rate well below market value. Fair enough that they could afford it. Low enough that it felt like the gift it was meant to be. On a cold morning in early January, we all met at Robert's office to sign the final documents. Louis arrived first, dressed in a button-down shirt I'd never seen him wear before. Tina came next, her hands shaking as she set her purse on the conference table. The others filed in behind them, each looking nervous and excited and slightly disbelieving. You're sure about this? Louis asked me for the 3rd time that week. You're really sure. I've never been more sure of anything, I said. We signed page after page. Initials here, signatures there, Robert explaining each section in his calm, methodical way. When it was done, when the store officially belonged to them, Tina started crying. I don't know what to say, she said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. We never thought we'd own anything like this. Never dreamed it was possible. You've been running it for years, I told her. You just didn't have the title. Now you do. Louis stood up and shook my hand, gripping it firmly. We'll take care of it, he said. We'll make you proud. You already have, I said, walking out of that office, leaving the store in their hands. It felt like setting down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. I was halfway to my car when I heard tires screech in the parking lot behind me. Caleb's SUV pulled up fast, too fast, and he jumped out before it had fully stopped. "Mom, what the hell did you do?" I turned to face him. "I sold my share of the store," I said calmly, "to people who deserved it." "You should have given it to me," he said, his voice rising. "I'm your son. That store was supposed to be mine." "Why?" I asked. "Because you showed up twice a week for photos. Because you walked around shaking hands and taking credit for work other people did. Because you told your friends you were taking over when you couldn't even tell me the names of. You never gave me a real chance." "I gave you years of chances," I said. "You wanted the status without the work. You wanted to inherit something you hadn't built. That's not how it works." "This is because of Christmas," he said. "Because of that stupid badge. You're punishing me for something Jane did." "This is because you let her do it," I said. "Because you sat there and smiked and told me food was for family, like I wasn't part of yours. Because you spent 3 years watching your wife treat me like hired help and said nothing." His face was red now, anger mixing with something that looked like shame. "We're family," he said, but his voice was weak. "Family," I repeated. "Is that what you call people you badge as staff? People whose chair you remove from the table?" He looked away. "The house is going on the market next week," I said. "You'll need to start looking for somewhere else to live." His head snapped back. "You can't sell the house. We live there." "I can and I am," I said. "It's in my name. My property. My decision. Where are we supposed to go?" "Anywhere you can afford," I said. "The same way every other adult figures it out." I got in my car and started the engine. Through the window, I could see him standing there, his phone already out, probably calling Jane. By the time I got back to the motel, my phone was ringing. Jane's name on the screen. I answered. "How could you do this?" she screamed before I could say hello. "That's our house. We built our life there. You can't just take it away from us." "I'm not taking anything," I said calmly. "I'm selling what's mine. What I bought. What I've been letting you live in." "We've invested so much in that place," she said. "The renovations, the furniture, the landscaping." "With my money," I reminded her. "Every mortgage payment came from me. Every upgrade you made was funded by me. You invested decorating choices. I invested actual money I earned." "What about the kids?" she demanded. "What about your grandson? You're going to uproot him from his home." "His too," I said. "He won't remember this house. And speaking of my grandson, I've set up an education trust for him. Fully funded college. Graduate school, if he wants it. But the trust is in his name alone. You and Caleb can't touch it." There was silence on the other end. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" Jane said finally, her voice cold. "This whole revenge plot." "It's not revenge," I said. "Revenge would be making you suffer. This is just me taking back what was always mine and making sure my grandson has opportunities you can't gamble away." "Caleb's father would never let you do this," she said. "Caleb's father signed the papers that started this," I said. "He chose to exclude me. Now he gets to live with the consequences." She hung up on me. I set the phone down and looked around the motel room that had become oddly comfortable over the past couple weeks. In 3 weeks, I'd be in that little house by the coast, starting over, building something new. No business to manage. No family members to take care of who didn't take care of me back. No house full of expensive furniture that meant nothing. Just me and the life I chose. By the end of January, the house had 3 offers. I accepted the highest one. Caleb and Jane had 60 days to move out. The store changed ownership officially on February 1st. Lewis hung a new sign. Same name, same location, different owners who actually showed up every day. Mark never came to the coast. He stayed in Fort Worth, renting an apartment near the Arlington store location. Still trying to salvage his relationship with Caleb. Still not understanding that some things break permanently when you ignore them long enough. He called sometimes, asked how I was doing, suggested we talk about reconciling. I was always polite, but I never said yes. Every structural piece of power that Caleb and Jane had assumed they'd inherit was gone. The business belonged to someone else. The house was sold. My accounts were locked away where they couldn't access them. They'd had everything handed to them, and they treated the person who handed it like she was invisible. Now they had exactly what they'd earned. Nothing but the lessons they should have learned years ago. 1 year later, I stood in the kitchen of my coastal bungalow on Christmas morning, mixing a salad in a bowl that didn't match anything else in the room. The house was small. 2 bedrooms, peeling paint on the front porch, a backyard with a fence that leaned slightly to one side. The appliances made noise when they ran. The floors creaked. The windows stuck when you tried to open them. I loved every imperfect inch of it. The dining table was set for 8. Mismatched chairs I'd collected from thrift stores and yard sales over the past year. Plates in different patterns, because I'd stopped caring about things coordinating. Cloth napkins from the dollar store mixed with ones I'd embroidered myself on quiet evenings. Mrs. Jenkins from next door arrived first, wearing one of her bright scarves and carrying a casserole dish. She was 73, had 3 grown children who rarely called, and the sharpest sense of humor I'd ever encountered. "Smells like something actually edible," she said, setting the dish on the counter. "Not like last week when I tried that recipe from the internet." Laura came next, a retired teacher from down the block who made pies that could make you forget your own troubles. She brought 2, pecan and apple. Then came the 2 young women from the diner where I took breakfast most mornings. Both new to town, both far from their own families, both working hard and trying to figure out their lives. And finally, Rebecca, my daughter, pulled up in her minivan, stuffed with kids and presents and snacks and the beautiful chaos that came with her everywhere she went. Her husband helped unload while the children ran straight to the backyard to see the crooked fence and the small garden I'd planted. "Grandma, is this your new house?" my youngest granddaughter asked. Her eyes wide as she looked around the small living room with its second-hand furniture and walls I'd painted myself. "It is," I said, crouching down to her level. "What do you think?" She turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. The mismatched chairs, the table that wobbled slightly, the decorations I'd made from construction paper with the neighbor kids, the tree in the corner with ornaments from the dollar store mixed with a few I'd brought from my old life. "It looks happy," she said. Those 3 words made my throat tight. "It is happy," I told her. "Very happy." We ate at that wobbly table, talking over each other, laughing too loud, passing dishes and spilling things and not caring about any of it. Nobody was performing. Nobody was staging photos. Nobody was worried about impressions or appearances. It was messy and warm and real. After dinner, while everyone else argued over a board game in the living room, Rebecca joined me in the narrow kitchen. "So," she said carefully, drying a dish I'd just washed. "Caleb called the other day." I kept washing, waiting. "He wanted to know if you were okay," she continued. "Didn't ask directly, but I could tell he was fishing for information." "Is he okay?" I asked. She shrugged. "The house sold. They're renting now, somewhere closer to Jane's parents. Her family helped them. Caleb doesn't say it outright, but I think he misses the store, the routine, the people who actually knew him." She paused. "He misses you, Mom." A year ago, I would have grabbed my keys that second, would have driven hours to fix things, would have forgiven everything, because the idea of distance hurt more than the memory of what they'd done. But I'd learned something in this little house by the water. "I hope he's learning," I said quietly. "I don't wish him harm. I never did. But I can't go back to being invisible just because he's uncomfortable being visible to his own mistakes." "Would you ever talk to him?" Rebecca asked. I dried my hands and looked at my daughter. "Maybe," I said. "If he can say the words that matter. If he can look me in the eye and say I'm sorry, and I see you. Really see you." "And if he does?" she asked. "Then we'll see," I said. "But I'm not waiting for it. I'm not putting my life on hold, hoping he figures it out. I'm living now, with or without his apology." Rebecca squeezed my hand. "You look good, Mom," she said. "Really good. Lighter, somehow." "I am lighter," I said. "Turns out when you stop carrying people who won't walk beside you, you can actually breathe." After everyone left, after the house settled into quiet, I walked to the small shelf by the front door. Framed between a photo of my grandchildren and a picture of the original Harper storefront was a badge from that last Christmas. Housekeeper. I'd gone back for it months after moving out, after the house was empty and echoing. Found it in a kitchen drawer with old takeout menus and broken pens. I'd almost thrown it away. But then I realized it wasn't a reminder of shame. It was a reminder of the day I stopped accepting less than I deserved. I touched the frame lightly. They tried to give me a label instead of a seat. Tried to make me small enough to fit their idea of convenient. They'd forgotten I was the one who built the floor they were standing on. If you're listening to this and you see yourself somewhere in my story, if you've been the one doing invisible work, accepting jokes at your expense, standing while everyone else sits, hear me clearly, you are not the help, unless you choose to be. And when your family gives you a badge instead of a chair, you're allowed to walk away. Take back what's yours, your time, your money, your dignity, your right to choose who gets a seat at your asterisk table. The sound of you standing up for yourself is louder than any room that tried to keep you invisible. Before you go, do me one favor. Have you ever reached your breaking point with family? What did you do? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to hear from you.